Good afternoon, everybody. Before I go any further, I just want to stop and acknowledge the brave trans organizers, activists, disruptors. I was sitting in the back, and I was so energized, and so y'all about it. And I want to acknowledge that first because you help us to remember that if our vision for radical change does not move from the center to those who exist on the edges of the margins, then we all fail. And we should not call ourselves radical at all. So thank you. It's interesting that I'm here again this year. I was here last year, actually, but had to rush off in the morning before I got on stage because my father passed as I was traveling back to see him. So this term, retool, that I'm talking to you about today, for me personally, takes on new meaning because I had to shift the way I sort of engaged the world after he died last year this time. And interestingly enough, my mom and my stepfather were somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean just yesterday, between Florida and the Caribbean, trying to get their way back to the shore so they can get home. We finally just heard from them today, after not hearing them for 4 days. All that to say, I'm personally reflecting on what it means to reset, to reimagine, to retool. I'm here and I'm looking around the room at so many people whose work I admire. I consider myself a novice in this field. I don't know much, I'm a student. But I've walked by people whose work every single day has made a definite change, not just in my life, but the lives of so many others, and I'm talking about for years. Even if folk haven't told you how great you are. So I want to stop first and acknowledge all of you for being the amazing people that you are. And I did want to name names. I didn't want to make you all mad if I forget some of the folk who I didn't name. But you're certainly here, and I appreciate you. And I start there because I wanted to ask you, what moved you to do the work that you do? Can you remember the thing? It might have been the loss of a friend, the loss of some people you know. It might have been the work that somebody was doing in your community to end the epidemic that is now HIV and AIDS. What was it that catapulted you into the work that you're doing? Can you look back in your mind, go back to that second, that day where you made a commitment and a choice to do this work? Can any of you remember that moment? If you can, and if you're able, raise your hand. And I'm beginning there partially because it's so easy to fall into the trap of work, thinking that it's 9 to 5, even though many of you are 9 to 5, 5 to 9, paid, unpaid, underpaid laborers. But I don't want to imagine the work as if it is work that is only meant to feed our stomachs and not work that is also meant to feed our souls. The work that we're called to do, that you do, is movement work. And it's why it's important for us to remember what actually got us started in the game, what it was, what happened, what it was that propelled us to do this work in the first place. And it's important to think about this work as movement work because we are in the midst of a bunch of change. And let me be clear here that although we can talk about all the animus that we're facing in the country right now, from white racial supremacy to anti-blackness to xenophobia, antagonism against the undocumented, transmisogyny, sexism, ... I know some of you in this room know something about some of those things already. This is not new. Some of us know and have experienced a lot of these forms of oppression already. The scale at which that we're facing it has shifted. But some of this stuff isn't new. But it's also an opportunity for us to think about the work that we do and to think about it not just as work, but as movement. Because movement comes when we are faced, and movements actually grow when we are faced with obstacles. Social change is precipitated by obstacles. It's precipitated by running into those things that typically will try to keep us down and keep us bound. But movements are energized by impossibility and setback. And in fact, when I thought about the folk that got up here and did this wonderful disruption earlier, and then imagine some of us who thought that that might have taken away some of our time from what might be a wonderful program, or how that doesn't actually fit into the scheme of things, It absolutely does. And if we don't remember that this movement that you're all part of was actually started by disruption, was actually started by organizing and activism, then we will have an ahistorical idea of why we're here in the first place. You didn't get here because somebody decided to have an agenda and a cute program. Somebody stood up, raised their voices, said enough is enough, we need to make some change, you're going to hear my voice, I am going to be heard, and made things happen such that we can all be sitting here today in this wonderful space that we have before us. That is why it's important to remember that this work is not just 9-to-5 deal. It's movement work. Say that with me. Movement work. But what does it take, though, then, to sort of sustain a movement? What are those ingredients that make a movement possible? And I should say here again, I acknowledge you. I'm here as a student, as a listener. I go into the work and do media every day. Now, you are out in the front line, brave as you can be, trying to combat a fight that is so bigger and has so much strength behind it, and yet you come to this fight every day, often without acknowledgement. So I'm here actually to honor you. What I can offer is some lessons that I learned from work that I've done at the local level in Newark or in Camden, or some of the things I learned over the last few years as working part of the Movement for Black Lives, of which some of you are part. The first thing I'll say, though, is that any movement has to begin with a source of injustice that is collectively seen. A source of injustice that is collectively seen. I think that's easy for us to sort of name that source here. We want an ending to the HIV epidemic and all of its consequences, the stigma and the shame that goes along with that, all of the other things that sort of are connected to it, from racism to classism to ... But movements also are called and organized by folk who are interested in not being bystanders and onlookers, but active participants in the ending of the thing that one sees as a problem. Movements are organized around a collective vision. And one of the things that I like to say here is why it's important to have a collective vision. It's also vitally important to make space for different practices and different approaches to getting to that vision what we want to create. I don't feel discomfort anymore when somebody tells me I'm wrong, or when somebody tells me that I can do things a different way, or when they disrupt the way that things are going, because we need all of that. What we're seeing and experiencing in this room at this moment is movement work. But we have to make sure that we have space for everybody's voices, if we are able to talk, to be heard, and everybody's positions to be heard, and everybody's ideas of how we can approach the problems that we're trying to solve, that we make space for them. Movements require shared vision, or what historian Robin Kelley calls, and I like this better, freedom dreams. That word is much more specific because it indicates that our dreams, if they are not rooted in ideas of justice, if they are not rooted in ideas of freedom and liberty, are not really radical visions at all. But here's the thing about freedom dreams, and I'll say more about this moving forward. Somebody's freedom dream can be another person's nightmare. Somebody's freedom dream can be another person's nightmare. Well, how so? Even our dreams, our visions, our imaginations are shaped often by some of the very forces we attempt to thwart every day. How is that possible? Well, if it wasn't that our freedom dreams can be so lopsided or myopic, we would not have to have disruptions like we had today. Our freedom dreams can be somebody else's nightmare, which is why we need to be self-reflexive and figure out not only whose feet are situated on our necks, but we need to determine whose necks our feet are situated on. Do you know that you can both be the oppressor and the oppressed at the same time? And I'm a church boy, so I know what claps do. I really want to be real here. It's possible that any of us can get up here and give a radical explanation of the ways that we experience oppression in the world based on status, based on the color of skin, based on sexual identity, orientation, gender expression, and still at the very same time have our feet on somebody's neck or wheelchair. Our freedom dreams can be somebody's nightmare. Movements require a commitment, an unrelenting commitment to a spirit of struggle. Struggle does not always mean comfort. In fact, for me and in many of the movement spaces I've been part of, struggle and discomfort has been the thing that bring us to the type of freedom dreams that we need to actualize to be free. Movement requires imagination and radical love. And when I think about love, I'm not thinking about the hallmarkish, Pollyannic love that we come to think about. I'm thinking about love that says, you know, you did me wrong. I know some things were done that were just not right. But I love you enough to show back up to the struggle the next day to fight with you. Love is the energy that removes the distance that would otherwise separate me and you. It's the thing that brings us back to the work. Because let me tell you about movement work. It's not so cute that you want to get back up and go back the next day sometimes. But love propels us to do that work. Love propels us to go back. So I want to say that these are some of the things that we can name as our tools, but they're already in the toolkit. It's just often the case that we forget that they're there. So much of what we need outside of what it seems to be scarce is already present. And in fact, scarcity actually inspires imagination. What do you do? What are you to do when everything, every tool you think you need seems to be snatched from in front of you? I grew up in a type of home with a mom in Camden when she made the best meals when the cupboards looked the scarcest. Y'all know what I'm talking about? And I would be sitting there like, Mom, how'd you make that? Goulash with all types of pastas and vegetables thrown together looking like nothing but tasting like something. When scarcity comes, that is the time when you go and take your imagination and go into the cupboard. Pull out all the things that might not otherwise look like anything when you put them together, and you get to work and you create something. I don't care what grant you take away from me. I don't care what program shuts. If I care about my community, I'm going to do whatever the hell I can to make sure my community get their needs met. Come what may, do whatever you need to do. When you really care and are about that life, you will get out there and do the work for the people. Imagination is what we need when we are confronted with scarcity, when we are confronted with times like we have been confronted with now. Some of us know something about scarcity. We know what these times feel like, even if the scale is different. And let me tell you why imagination is important. And you're probably thinking, well, how is that more important than public policy, service provision, grants, collaboratives, all these other fancy terms we use? Because it's precisely the visions, the imaginations, or imaginaries that catalyze policy. You know that, right? The reason why we have some policies that doesn't have all of us present, like I said, because somebody's freedom dream is somebody else's what? Not everybody's present in your imagination. Not everybody is present, not everybody is alive in your imagination, which is why we can create public policy, programs, initiatives, collaboratives, partnerships, PPVs, ABCs, EDFs, and forget some of the very people whose lives depend on programs the most. This is why we need our imagination. It's an imagination that cannot at all be discovered and built by one person's imagination alone. Everybody got to be at the table. Everybody got to be part of the conversation. And just as one example, me and Patrisse Cullors, we organized the Black Lives Matter ride to Ferguson. We took about 500 people with us. We thought we was doing something special. It was special. You know, we wanted to build off the legacy of our foremothers and fathers, our forefolk. Do this freedom ride. We were very adamant. We said, this is not going to be Diane Nash or Bayard Rustin 2.0. Women's voices, cis and trans voices, will be centered and they will be heard. This is not going to be organized around charismatic men who speak good and wear suits. This is not just going to be the type of thing where we're going to be up here acting a certain type of way, respectable politics, not letting the formerly incarcerated up on the bus, not allowing young people with their pants sagging on the bus. This is going to be about making space for all of the Black lives. And yet, about 2 days into our event, trans sisters came to us and said, you know what? first, I wasn't even going to come because it's often the case where I don't even feel safe in spaces like this. But I felt safe. But what I didn't like is that you didn't include us in the leadership roles and in the planning. And I sat there and I said, you know what, you're right. For all of the good that had infected our freedom dream, our imagination, we were so stuck in our own space, in our own sort of world, that we didn't think about our trans sisters and brothers. We were stuck in our cisgenderedness, the comfort of the knowledge of our own safety and our own being. And it's very possible that the very good thing that we may think we're doing is not excellent, because we get stuck and we forget that other lives have to be part of our freedom dreams too. Scarcity inspires imagination. Our freedom dreams can be some other's nightmare. It's possible that we often tend to name whose feet are on our necks, but forget to name whose necks our feet are on. These are some of the lessons I learned. But at the end of the day, what gets me up every day to do any of the work that I do is a question that was repeated to me by Jackie Alexander, who is a Black transnational feminist, who repeats the question that Audre Lorde, the Black lesbian feminist goddess oracle, repeated to her: why have you come? And that's all she would say to me. And she would follow that by saying, why have you come here? Why have you come here at this time, in this place now, and what is your work? And I'll leave us with that question today, because I know what it feels like to do this work that we're calling a movement, when so much of the energy, the radical potential of it has been sapped away because of the ways it's been institutionalized. I know what that feels like as part of a burgeoning movement for Black lives, as part of a long struggle for Black liberation work. And I know what it feels like when things are institutionalized. It saps away the potential for radicality. But I'm asking you again today, why have you come? Oh my, I feel like a preacher right now. Why have you come here? Not to this hotel, not to this conference, to this luncheon to hear us speak, not to eat this food. Why have you come to the universe at this time? It is because you got a work to do. And I'm so grateful that you all have been doing this work already. My only hope is that you walk away knowing that regardless of what comes, regardless of the setbacks, as long as you remember that you've been part of this thing, this calling, this vocation, this movement to end HIV and racism and transmisogyny and sexism and elitism and everything else that keeps us from living our full potential as human beings in this world, things will change. And we will see transformation. And even if we are not always able to knock down the barriers in the walls, as long as we can expand our freedom dreams such that we can see everybody in them alive and well and flourishing, and as long as we do, we can make good on those promises in real ways in real time, things will be different. And it will be because of you that would have been done. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you again to my sisters and brothers that got up here to remind us to work. Keep doing the work, y'all.